Okay, so in this video, we are going to take multiple input tables and concatenate them into one table so we can use it in a pivot. And these are our data sources. So we have three separate tables that each have the same column headers. As usual, I always start with defining the variables. So all I've done up here in each of these columns is define the variable name, so the table it represents, and then I just did a reference to a table, the respective table that each variable represents. So equals py tab, just as an example here. And I went to this sheet and press Control Enter. And as you can see, it automatically put this in an Excel function, which is basically the translator from Excel data to Python data, and reference the table name. It said headers equals true, which we want. Then one quick thing I want to mention is you'll see in all of my Python cells that they each have the name of the variable they're defining in them. And I do that by putting the variable name in quotes at the bottom of each cell. And I'm just doing that for demonstration purposes, so I can easily point out where variables live on the sheet. But in the real world practical situations, you're just going to have define a variable like this. Variable equals, and then the Excel function as I just demonstrated. So that's just a quick tidbit. Next, I took a look at the pivot table parameters and defined those variables. Very similar. I used the equals py tab and then selected the relevant information to store it as a Python variable. Did the same thing for columns. And then column order, when we make the pivot table in Python, the column order, it's just easiest to just write out the column order like this because it puts it alphabetically and we want it chronologically. So I'm going to reference this cell when that time comes. And then I have our values field as the order totals. So if all you want to do is concatenate the tables and then build a pivot table in Excel, this is really the only cell you need. You just type in all data, whatever variable name you want, and then you pass in list form all the data table variables that we defined earlier. And when I say list form, I mean enclosed in square brackets, and then comma, and ignore index equals true. And that will give us a data frame that looks like this. So all the data is now concatenated with a single column header, and everything is lined up perfectly. And just as a side note, if the column headers are not in the same order, it will still work. And if they have, the only thing that you have to pay attention to is that columns that you're actually going to use, like order total, you just have to make sure that that is consistently named across all the columns. Otherwise, no other special formatting is needed. So yeah, once you have all your data, your tables loaded into the data frame, you can equals py a reference to all data, press Control Enter, and up here next to the formula bar, you're going to select Excel values, and then you can just Alt V, enter existing. We'll just put it right here, and you can make your pivot tables. I think we want product type right here. We'll do month name and order total. And there's your pivot table. I mean, Excel pivot tables are nice. They're quick and easy, but Python is a little more robust with their pivot tables. We're just going to touch the surface today, but I just want to show you some things to get you started in Python pivot tables. So the way you make a pivot table in Python is you state the variable representing the data frame, which in our case is all data, and then you type pivot table to get to the pivot table function, and there's 4 primary arguments that you need to pass into it. We have index, which is the rows, columns, values, and then aggregate function. And the aggregate function is basically the exactly what it sounds like. It's the aggregating function. So if in an Excel pivot table, if you go down here and click value field settings, these are all the aggregate functions that are available in Excel pivot tables. But the interesting thing in Python is that you can use custom functions here. So that can make for some pretty robust and powerful statistical calculations if you want. Anyways, so yeah, and then once you have all those functions or all those parameters, you just set them equal to the variables that we defined up here, all these, and yeah, then you just press Control Enter, and then we have our pivot table, or at the beginning of it anyways. So you'll notice a couple things. First, the columns are out of order and there's no totals. So first we're going to add totals, or not add totals. First, I'm going to show you how to program it with totals. So this step is basically the same exact thing as the last step. There's all those 4 arguments that we went over, except if you want totals, you're going to add 2 more arguments. The first one is margins equals true. So that basically means like in the bottom margin and the right margin, you're going to have whatever the aggregation function calculations are at the total level. So in this case, it's going to be our margin values are going to represent grand totals. So you just put margins name with an underscore equals grand totals in quotes. And then you'll see we get the grand totals at the across the bottom and then on the far right. Okay, so now that we have our grand totals, you'll notice that the months are still out of order. So the way that we fix that is we just have to pass the columns parameter to the data frame. Right now, the data frame's name is PT for pivot table. And the way we pass arguments into pivot tables and regular tables, for that matter, in Python, is we use square brackets, and then columns colon equals, and then we are referencing the column order variable that we did up here. So this is how the columns are going to look now that we've passed the column order variable into the columns parameter of the table. So we get, after we do that, we get the ordered months with grand total at the end. And yeah, and that's how the pivot table, that's what we want. Okay, so now that we have our pivot table all nice and stored in a variable, we can just equals py tab and just referencing the variable. And before I hit Control Enter, I'm just going to go up here and change it to Excel values. Control Enter. And then just because it doesn't really come with any formatting out of the box, at least at the time of this recording, one thing I like to do with Python pivot tables, and really any Python data for that matter, is just quickly add, little conditional formatting rules. So for example, I like to do this one where I put borders around everything. So if you just click on the cell, make a single cell, make the reference non-absolute, and then not equal to nothing. So basically that's saying if the cell has something in it, then we're going to format it with a border outline. Then click OK, and then we can format painter, and we can just drag that across our pivot table. And once it finishes loading, we'll have our nice borders, maybe, put some bold, something like this. And now we have our pivot table. And that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm probably going to be going over how to extract parts of this pivot table and store it and work with it in Python. Of course, we can always work with it in Excel. So equals plus that, if we can do something like that. But if we wanted to store these values in Python and keep working with them, it becomes useful to be able to slice and dice it and store that information in variables. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or you want me to cover anything specific in future videos. Please subscribe, and thanks for watching.